أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. فصل يا ربي وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد واغفره لي واغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات أجمعين يا خير الغافرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. In this presentation, the title of my presentation is Mounting IOK Imperial Researches in the East African Region, Some Tentative Suggestions. I begin my presentation with a quotation from Mary Midgley, who lived from 1919 to 2018, 99 years, as quoted by the Galileo Commission. This quotation is important in the light of transdisciplinarity. The quotation says, "This whole reductive program, this mindless materialism, this belief in something called matter as the answer to all questions is not really science at all. It is and always has been just an image, a myth, a vision, an enormous act of faith." Since the central preoccupation of this conference is to look at concepts, methods, practical experiences, and challenges, and prospects of generating knowledge and research in line of Islamic integration of knowledge, this presentation will focus on three interlocking points. Number one, to highlight the key distinguishing features between IOK and the scientific method, which has dominated the world for the last 300 years. Secondly, to revisit the logic behind IOK assumptions. And thirdly, and perhaps more importantly, to explain the suitability of IOK and transdisciplinarity as how these can be best demonstrated with universities in the region, leading the way of mounting empirical researches as distinguished from purely theoretical researches. In this presentation, I will be standing on the shoulders of two intellectual giants in the region, Professor Kasule and the late Professor Karama. My second point, perhaps we should begin. Why bother with IOK? If knowledge is just knowledge, and we need to seek knowledge from where it is, why this fuss for integration of knowledge? It is important to use IOK for two major reasons. The first one, because it is humanly impossible for human beings to build a system that can prove its own foundation. And this was proved many years back by Ernest Nagel and James Newman in their famous book, Gödel's Proof, which was published in 1931. In this book, these people demonstrated that all human systems cannot prove their own foundations. For ease of understanding, let me give just a few examples. Example number 1, the scientific method can only accept an empirical observation as valid if that observation can be intersubjectively verified. That is, if independently observed by others. Practical experience shows that it is not possible for the observations of different people to be proved or to be identical. As Brecht has said, this is the first and most important acception of scientific method to common sense assumptions. What these people are saying is that suppose you have 3 people looking into a microscope and they all see the same thing. Then, in view of the scientific method, what they have viewed is intersubjectively verified, because Ali has seen the same thing, Juma has seen the same thing, and Anton has seen the same thing. So this is intersubjectively verified, which means that different people have independently verified that statement. Now, what Brecht is saying, here you cannot prove empirically that actually what they saw cannot be verified. All that you can verify is that they have all reported the same thing. But we cannot prove empirically that actually each and everything everyone saw was the same, because you have no way of knowing that. It's like, say, if someone is saying, okay, I feel pain, or I feel hunger. Now this is an area of introspection, it's not an area of empirical. But how do you know that how he feels exactly is the way you feel? You cannot prove it. You can only assume that maybe he was also feeling as the way I feel when I'm hungry. So this is the point. But let us give a simple example which can be easily stated. Example number 2. If we look at the very first pillar of the scientific method, says science must allow only empirically verifiable statements. Now, this principle is itself a command, and therefore it is not empirically verifiable. So the inescapable paradox here is that science, which is supposed to be fiercely empirical, cannot function without smuggling in presuppositions which are themselves not empirical. Example number 3, and the last one in this regard. In any search of knowledge, as always and unavoidably preceded by some background assumption. For example, Taj notes in his book, if we ask ourselves, what is truth? An idea is taken to be true if it corresponds to reality. But that assumes that there is a reality. Otherwise, you cannot proceed. So you want to search for knowledge and you want to know the truth, you have to begin by an assumption, an unproven assumption, that there is a reality somewhere. Otherwise, you cannot proceed. Now, secondly, why it's important for us to look at IOK assumptions, we emphasize the need of adopting IOK because, as I shall show now immediately, even where the facts are accepted by everyone, the interpretation may be different. And here, I want first to show the key distinguishing features between integration of knowledge and the scientific method. There are at least 3 background philosophical axioms which set apart IOK and the scientific method. The first one is ontological. The second one is epistemological. And the last one is methodological. IOK is rooted in Tawheed. There is no God but God, which implies that in terms of ontology, when we are talking about ontology, we are talking about being. In terms of ontology, according to the Tawheed, is only of 2 generic kinds: creator and creatures. The first category has only one member, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He alone is the one and the only God. God the eternal, the uncaused cause of all that exists. He begets not, and neither is he begotten. And there is nothing that could be compared with him. The second category includes all creatures in the universe. Now, the dissimilarity between the 2 categories is not only absolute, but also eternal. That is, it is forever impossible for the one to be united by the other. Allah is the originator of the heavens and the earth. I'm quoting the verse in verse 42, in Surah 42, verse 11. Allah is the originator of the heavens and the earth. He has given you mates of your own kind, just as he has willed among the beasts, and be their mates, multiply you thereby. But there is nothing like that for him. He alone is all hearing, all seeing. Like such a different share. On the other hand, the ontological postulate of the scientific method affirms that matter, in its good sense, matter is the definitive, ultimate reality in the universe. Everything which appears to be non-material, like, say, self-consciousness, stems from the material entity. In this case, the human brain. And so, according to the scientific method, anything which is definitive in the entire universe is material. Anything which is non-material stems from the material, or is a result of the material, or is a manifestation of the material, but is itself not definite. Now, from this assumption, the world, when we come now to the second category, and that is the second principle, everything epistemological level, it is that the world is known. Why? Because the world is matter. We can know it. And therefore, we can know everything. Everything in the world is absolutely knowable because the world is natural. By natural, they mean to know the world, to know the universe, you don't stand in need of anything supernatural. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's purely natural. And so it's possible to know everything. I understand this. These 2 first postulates of the scientific method, that is ontologically, that the world is nothing but matter. Number 2, that the world is knowable. At the level of methodology, there's no way you can know except by empirical observation and experimentation. Why? Because they don't accept anything spiritual and anything which is not matter. And they believe that given time, human beings with these tools can eventually and unceasingly continue to look the profound mysteries of the universe. I'm continuing the key distinguishing features between IOK and scientific method. Now, the Islamic perspective, on the other hand, uses at the level of epistemology, uses the principles of cosmic order and unity of creation and unity of truth as anchors of epistemology. The principle of cosmic order says that since the world has been created by God, and you can see cosmic order throughout the universe, there is nothing, it logically follows, there is from the unity of Allah. If there are in heaven more than one God, then certainly there wouldn't have been a cosmic order. And at any rate, when you deny Tawhid, which implies that there is no God but God, it means there are more gods. If there are more gods, then there is no supreme God, because each God will not be supreme. You cannot say we have two supreme gods. Both of them will be not supreme. And the affirmation that Allah is al-haq, the truth, implies that He is also the source of knowledge. And it also acknowledges that truth is indeed knowable, but the level of that knowledge cannot be omniscient. So the unity of God and the unity of truth is succinctly summarized by Al-Faruqi in his magisterial work at Tawhid, its implications for thought in life as follows, and I quote, "To acknowledge the godliness of God and His unity is to acknowledge the truth and its unity. Divine unity and the unity of truth are inseparable. They are aspects of one and the same reality. This becomes evident when we consider that truthfulness is the quality. This becomes evident when we consider that truthfulness is the quality of the proposition of our Tawhid, that is, God is one. For if truth was not one, then such statement that God is one could not be true. To say that the truth is one is therefore to assert that not only that God is one, but that no other God is God. The very combination of the two, negation and the assertion, which is in La ilaha illallah. Now, the implication of this supposition is that you cannot at the same time something be true and again be false. That's the principle. Now, I will give illustrations about the implications, illustrations from physics, and later on illustrations from history. I want to illustrate this point by looking at the work of Stephen Hawking, who is regarded as the Albert Einstein of the 21st century. In his book, titled A Brief History of Time, he says in the introduction, that book was in the London Sunday Times list of bestseller for 237 weeks, longer than any other book. It has been translated into something like 40 languages and has sold one copy for every 700 men, women, and children in the world. And as Nathan of Microsoft remarked, I have sold more books on physics than Madonna has on sex. This is the foreword by Stephen Hawking himself in 1996 in the 26th printing of that book. Now, I'm using this book because here is a scientist who is considered the Albert Einstein of the 21st century, and his book has been sold and translated in more than 40 languages throughout the world. So here we are using now some of the remarks, statements of Hawking, which was published posthumously in his book, other book, which is known as Brief Answers to the Big Questions. And I invite you to listen to his arguments, and I challenge you to tell me, what do you think could have been your answers? Anyone who can give good, relevant Islamic answers, I promise to give him a reward. I will not say now what kind of reward. But please listen carefully to the first chapter of his book. I'm talking about brief answers to the big questions. Chapter 1, he is asking, is there a God? Quite unsurprisingly, for someone whose background assumptions has always been that matter is nothing but the definitive and ultimate reality of the universe, you cannot expect him to say that there is God. And he says, and I quote now, listen carefully, and I want your explanation later on. We start with his conclusion. It is my view that the simplest explanation is that there is no God. Here is someone who is very influential and known as the current Albert Einstein of the 21st century. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate. This leads me to a profound realization. There is probably no heaven, no afterlife either. I think belief in an afterlife is just wishful thinking. There is no reliable evidence for it, and it flies in the face of everything we know in science. Let us now look at the evidence. He adduces in support of that conclusion. This is very, very important. If you believe in science, like I do, you believe that there are certain laws that are always obeyed. The universe is a machine governed by principles of law, or laws that can be understood by the human mind. I believe that the discovery of these laws has been humankind's greatest achievement, for it is these laws of nature, as we now call them, that will tell us whether we need a God to explain the universe at all. The laws of nature are a description of how things actually work in the past, present, and future. They govern everything that is going on. But what is really important is that these physical laws, as well as being unchangeable, are universal. They apply not just to the flight of a ball, but to the motion of a planet, and everything else in the universe. Unlike laws made by humans, underline the point, unlike laws made by humans, the laws of nature cannot be broken. That is why they are so powerful and when seen from a different standpoint, if you accept that the laws of nature are fixed, then it doesn't take long to ask what law is there. This is quoted from page 6. Hawking also says, at the moment of the Big Bang, an entire universe came into existence, and with each space. But even here, Hawking says God does not come into the picture. We can use the laws of nature to address the very origins of the universe. And he says the laws of nature itself tell us that not only would the universe have popped up into existence without any assistance, like a proton, and have required nothing in terms of energy, but also that it is possible that nothing caused it. Nothing caused the Big Bang. Nothing. Now here is a very, very, very respected scientist. Now, in short, if someone is guided by the ontological axiom that the universe is nothing but matter or matter, the logical epistemological position is that this natural order is not only knowable, but also that there is nothing supernatural about it. But this determination to reject the existence of this. Underline that point. Unlike laws made by humans, the laws of nature cannot be broken. That is why they are so powerful and, when seen from a religious standpoint, controversial too. If you accept, as I do, that the laws of nature are fixed, then it doesn't take long to ask, what role is there for God? This is quoted from page 26 to 28. Hawking also says, at the moment of the Big Bang, an entire universe came into existence, and with it space. But even here, Hawking says God does not come into the picture. We can use the laws of nature to address the very origins of the universe. And he says the laws of nature itself tell us that not only could the universe have popped up into existence without any assistance, like a proton, and have required nothing in terms of energy, but also that it is possible that nothing caused it. Nothing caused the Big Bang. Nothing. Now here is a very, very, very respected scientist. Now, in short, if someone is guided by the ontological axiom that the universe is nothing but matter or nature, the logical epistemological position is that this natural order is not only knowable, but also that there is nothing supernatural about it. But this determination to reject the existence of the supreme creator of the universe crumbles when the so-called laws of nature are invoked. It is not clear what exactly he means by nature, and why or how this nature decided to put into force these very powerful, immutable, and universal laws which govern the entire universe. Again, looking at the breathtaking complexity, grandeur, and the beauty of the universe, or the human body, one must also grant to this vast array of animate, inanimate, and unconscious phenomena like planets, stars, galaxies, and microbes, qualities of supreme intelligence, power, mercy, and compassion. The argument is, what I'm trying to say, the argument is, if indeed you are saying it's only the laws of nature, and by nature you mean all these stones, mountains, planets, and animals, and microbes, bacteria, and so on, then you must necessarily grant to these inanimate objects intelligence, mercy, wisdom, and compassion. Because how do they, for example, the sun position itself 93 million miles from the earth, whereas if it went further, it would freeze. If it came lower, it would burn up. So it means you are granting these attributes of God to these inanimate, what we call laws of nature. And this is precisely what Hawking is saying, as you can see from this last quote. One who defines God as the embodiment of the laws of nature. No more, no less. It is the laws of nature which are God. However, this is not what most people would think of God, would think of as God. They mean a human-like being with whom one can have a personal relationship. I use the word God in an impersonal sense, like Einstein did, for the laws of nature. My prediction is that we will know the mind of God by the end of this century. So we now know that actually, these people are worshiping the laws of nature. Now just imagine, it is the principle, the underlying principle that there is nothing except matter which has guided or misguided these people to this kind of conclusion. They are ready to grant the supernatural powers to the laws of nature, but they are not willing to accept that there is God. From the above statements by Hawking, we can appreciate the overriding influence of background assumptions. Through background assumptions, integration of knowledge, the existence of what are referred to as the laws of nature is acknowledged, but not as independent laws made by nature, but as sunnat Allah, ways or decrees of God. The fact is accepted as a manifestation of the power of God. It is God himself who has notified mankind about the existence and the immutability of these decrees. If you go to Surah Al-Fatir, number 43, no change will you ever find in God's ways, in Sunnat Allah. No deviation will you ever find in God's way. And they are saying these laws are immutable, cannot be changed. Of course, it's a fact which is already recorded by the creator of the universe, that he has put these laws, but because these people don't want to accept anything except matter, they accept this reality of these laws, but they assume that they were made by human beings. The same applies to other factual statements of science, like the Big Bang, the origin of all living entities in water, on the understanding that all praise is due to God, creator of heavens and the earth. So even when you are saying you are studying basic sciences, it's about facts and so on, you see again the power of the underlying assumptions. This is considered basic science. Now, let's move now to the second area. But before we go to that area of let me just say that Somewhere, I think in Ihya Ulumuddin, Imam Ghazali has talked about, this problem which these people are facing, confusing the agent as the real power behind what is seen in the universe. And the example he gives, I don't know the exact kind of words he has used, but the example he gives is like saying someone blaming, there's a judge. The judge has written a sentence condemning someone to death. And then someone is saying, I really blame that the hand of that person, because it is that hand which wrote this judgment. It was not the judge, but the hand, because it was the hand which wrote the. Or you ask someone for assistance. Can you give me some money? And he keeps quiet, doesn't answer you. You repeat, can you give me some money? He doesn't tell you anything. And suddenly a hand enters his pocket, takes money out and gives it to you. And you say, I thank that hand, because this person didn't want to give me money. But the hand felt, no, this is unfair. It entered the pocket, took the money, and gave it to me. Because this is what is observable. But the machinery behind that Allah is the Musabbib al-Asbab is not seen. Now let us move to the illustrations from history. Here we are using few examples from the #1 New York Times bestseller titled Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow by Yuval Noah Harari. He is also the author of a million-copy bestseller, Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, and his latest book published last year, Nexus, A Brief History of Information Networks from the Stone Age to Artificial Intelligence. Now, in this book, there are so many disturbing facts presented, presumably facts presented, but I've chosen only a few. The first one is on human mortality, the right to life. From an Islamic perspective, the universe around us is definitely knowable, but human knowledge will forever remain limited. Human beings can never achieve omniscience. We can never know everything, no matter how much knowledge is acquired. Now, this fact, again, has been captured very well by Taj. He's saying, in the end, ultimately life and the universe are beyond our ken. Most of what ought to be knowable remains unknown. And it is logically impossible to know how much is unknown, since we would be able to gauge the extent of our own ignorance only if we were already omniscient, and so could compare what we know with all there is to know. This is the paradox of knowledge. You will remember that Hawking is saying, by the end of this century, we shall be able to know everything. Now, here, to know everything, you need to know what is needed to know, and then to know where you are now. Now, if you already know what is needed to know, you are already omniscient. It's like saying, okay, I need how much to build a house? I need $1 million. Okay, how much do I have? I have $100,000. So I still need the rest. So if you don't know what is needed to know, you cannot know how much to know. So it is impossible from an Islamic perspective. Now, illustrations from history. As a result of this conviction, and since the right to life is not limited to the expiry date. I have jumped. Now in this book on human mortality, Harari observes that the world is now living in a period, in an era, what he calls the last days of death. Now we are living in the last days of death. Death will soon be conquered. He argues that since we all agree, look at the reasoning, since we all agree that human life is the most sacred thing in the universe. Now, I don't think we all agree about this, but he says, since we all agree that human life is the most sacred thing in the universe, and the right to life is humanity's most fundamental value, clearly death violates this right. Death is a crime against humanity, and we ought to wage total war against death. Page 21. And he accuses religions of not sanctifying life, but sanctifying death. And as a result, he's saying religions have always been quite tolerant of death, that our religions tolerate death. Because without death, these religions will lose their hold. And I quote now, he says, just try to imagine Christianity, Islam, or Hinduism in a world without death, which is also without heaven, hell, or reincarnation. Modern science and modern culture have an entirely different take. What is it? They are saying death is a purely technical problem. Nothing, there's no metaphysical mystery about it. And for modern people, death is a technical problem that can be solved humans' technical solutions. He gives some example. For example, human life, humans always die due to some technical glitch. For example, the heart stops pumping blood, the main artery is clogged by fatty deposits, or cancer cells spread in the liver, or germs multiply in the lungs. Now, if you ask him, what is responsible for all these technical problems? The answer is other technical problems. The heart stops pumping blood because not enough oxygen reaches the heart muscle. Cancerous cells spread because a chance genetic mutation rewrote the instruction. And germs settled my lungs because somebody sneezed on the subway. Nothing metaphysical about it. It is a technical problem, and every technical problem has a technical solution. In short, according to Kotler and Diamandis, they are saying, as we are talking now, scientists have discovered 9 causes of death. They resolve these and no death. As a result of this conviction, and since the right to life is not limited by an expiry date, in 2013, Google launched a sub-company, California Life Company, Calico, with a specific mission to solve death. Google Ventures is pumping 36% of its $2 billion portfolio in longevity research. Harari notes Such dreams are shared by other Silicon luminaries. And he has enumerated them and how much they give. But they are saying, in short, 25 years from now, by 2050, we will have a serious shot at immortality by cheating death in a decade at each time. Come 2050, you can go, likely to go to you want to add fuel. You go to this fuel station, you add, and then you continue with your journey. Every 10 years, you increase your life by another decade. Although Harari describes approving the ongoing projects to increase longevity and predicts the real struggle ahead of us may be to be perpetually youthful, the Islamic point of view regards his confidence as misplaced. It stems from the same problem of confusing observable physical laws of nature as supreme. Almighty God, the originator of the universe, is Musabbib al-Asbab, the one who determines even the causes. So he has the ability to establish another million causes of death, and the researchers can only deal with the apparent causes. They cannot deal with the ultimate cause, because Allah has made it as the real one of the, He has created death and hayat as a test for the rest of us. More importantly, the Quran is not silent about this fear of death and the corresponding inordinate life, desire for life, longevity. The Quran in Al-Baqarah says people who disbelieve, they like to live longer. Some would like to live 1,000 years, but even then, this will not help. Let's see briefly the other right, human happiness, the right to happiness. In the previous session, people talked about happiness. Now, in this book, Harari raises three main points. The first is that while in the past, philosophers like Epicurus and some people considered happiness as a supreme good, the majority of people dismissed them. But today, that is the default position. People are fighting for, struggling to ensure that they have immortality. But the other thing, Harari underlines one point, namely the distinction between the right to happiness and the right to the pursuit of happiness. He is saying, when you look at the American Declaration, it does not say that people should have the right to happiness. No. People have the right to the pursuit of happiness, which means that they have the right to seek happiness in whatever they want. And here he drags in homosexuality. If I think I'll be happier marrying John than marrying Mary, it's up to me. He uses this right of pursuit of happiness. The second point is that throughout the 19th and 20th century, many governments assumed that people will be happy with increased economic development. So we had GDP as a measuring rod. But the reality has shown that while these countries managed succeeded in industrialization, education, and health. They made their countries stronger, but did not make their people happier. Quite the reverse. For example, the index of happiness in the world shows that countries which are poor, the people are happier than countries which are rich. And the third point is that according to scientific findings, human beings are made happy only by pleasant sensations in their bodies and nothing else. Now, this is a very fundamental area. In short, he is saying, with evidence from one recent research, rats were considered, taken as to undergo research. Scientists put electrodes in the brains of rats, which stimulated happiness. If the rats press a particular button, they feel sensations of happiness. If they stop, the happiness is over. They press and then they feel very happy. Now, they are saying all the rats, given the choice of having tastier food and pressing, they all chose to press for happiness. That sensation, so beautiful, so sweet, they ignore food. Like children when they are absorbed with video games, you come and eat food, here, no, he's busy with his video games. So they all perished out of hunger and exhaustion. Why? Because they went on pressing, enjoying. So they said, okay, now research, as we are talking now, many research labs in universities, pharmaceutical companies, and criminal organizations have developed a wide range of drugs to overcome fear, sorrow, and trauma, as well as to increase a sense of peacefulness, confidence, and ecstasy. The bad news is that the biochemical pursuit of happiness is also #1 cause of crime in the world. Now that is the bad side of it. But he's saying, and this is again, I want you to consider, biochemistry as such, in research labs, experts are already working on more than sophisticated ways of manipulating human biochemistry. And he's saying, no matter the exact method, gaining happiness through biological manipulation won't be easy. It requires altering the fundamental patterns of life. But then it wasn't easy to overcome famine, plague, and war. So he's approving these, but somehow approving that they will eventually make people happier. The last one is on human accountability. In this one, on human accountability, again, these people assume that human beings are not accountable. Why? Because our belief in free will results from faulty logic. When a biochemical chain reaction makes me desire something, to press the right switch, I feel that I really want to press it. So they are saying that when science dissected a human being, they found no soul, no self, no free will. All that they found hormones and all these biochemical reactions. So whatever someone chooses, it's not his choice. It is a biochemical reaction. and so he's not responsible. He goes on to say, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish theologians teach their followers that if someone chooses good desires, they end up in heaven, and those who choose bad desires end up in hell. Now the question he poses is exactly, how exactly did Eve or Hawa, for example, choose to eat the forbidden fruit? Was the desire free of her free choice? If not, why punish her? So he insists that actually human beings act according to their desires. And he says, if by free will we mean the ability to act according to our desires, then he says, okay, then it is true that human beings have free will like chimpanzees, dogs, snakes, or pigs. But the million-dollar question is not whether parrots or human beings can act upon their desires. The question is whether they can choose their desires in the first place. The anticlimax on this subject comes when Harari concludes by saying, doubting free will is not just a philosophical exercise. It has practical implications. If organisms indeed lack free will, it implies that we can manipulate and even control their desires using drugs, genetic engineering, or direct brain stimulation. Now here, these people want to confuse people about accountability. They are saying that human beings, when you look at science, and they are adducing the evidence of science, when you look at science, you can see that there are certain biochemical reactions which cause these desires. And it's not this person. Even if someone kills another person, it is not his choice. It was these biochemical reactions which led him to commit what he committed. Now, his question is, why should these people be held accountable? Because and he's saying religions like Islam, Christianity, and so on, assume that people, accuse people for choosing their desires. If you choose good desires, you go to heaven. If you choose bad desires, you go to hell. Now, this is factually wrong. Islam, I'm not sure about Christianity, but Islam accepts these facts. Islam accepts this fact. And the fact is, no human being is choosing his desires. No. Desires come into the human body uninvited. The point is, it doesn't necessarily mean because desires have come, therefore they have to be fulfilled. That's where Harari is going wrong. I mean, someone who is very devoted to his wife may have desires after seeing a very elegant, beautiful, charming lady. Now, these desires come uninvited, but it doesn't mean that he must give free rein. Practical experience has shown human beings always fight with these desires. So saying that religions assume that people make or choose their desires is wrong. Both by experience, in the month of Ramadan, Muslims fast during the month of Ramadan. They desire food, they desire drink, but resist. And the entire program of human life, education, is to make people control, or this notion of emotional intelligence. When people talk of emotional intelligence, it's simply a question of how someone can control his or her desires. So in fact, the fact that these people want to intervene, it shows that actually people have the freedom of choice. Otherwise, why manipulate? Now, finally, and this is the last point, and the most important point in this presentation, the suitability and sustainability of IOK. And I want to summarize it by quoting Roger Garudi, who made this statement 36 years ago. He is saying, the best way is to prove ourselves capable of solving the problems that the West is incapable of solving. Now, let me emphasize this point. Throughout the workshop, throughout this seminar, we have been dealing with the IOK, and we have been told about the frameworks, the principles, the guidelines, the framework which should be used in IOK. Now, the point I'm trying to underline, and was stated by Roger Garudi 36 years ago, we can only prove the suitability of this by proving to ourselves the need that we have the capability of solving problems. We need to discover new forms of growth and development, a culture that does not lead to human destruction, but to the flowering of humanity. For this is of capital importance, not to read the words of Allah in the Quran with the eyes of the dead. That is to say, with the eyes of those who may have found the straight path, but went no further than to solve their problems. Our previous scholars used the Quran to solve their problems. Let us also use the Quran to solve our problems. And to do so, we need now, two aspects which were noted by Professor my friend, Professor Salisu. At the end of his presentation, he mentioned two areas, which of course have been mentioned by others. Shamsuddin also mentioned the importance of research, but Salisu mentioned the question of creative thinking and critical thinking. So what I'm trying to say, I suggest that as universities, we may begin by identifying the major problems facing our communities, preferably starting with what are known as critical social infrastructures. The four critical social infrastructures: education, health, economy, food, agriculture, and security. Now, in two recent studies, one by Professor Omar Hassan Kasule, and the other one by the late Professor Mohamed Karama, may be a good starting point. In his paper presented at the Human Capital Development Program of the Muslim Society of Nigeria in November last year, Professor Omar Hassan Kasule looked critically at the linkage between the psychological well-being of family members and an ideal family lifestyle. And it is the family which imparts the offspring with the qualities needed for a wholesome and balanced psychological health, such as trust, loyalty, sense of belonging, and social responsibilities. He also noted that the negative consequences of one dysfunctional family actually is carried over for more than 30 years. And then you have to succeeding families. Then you have a very vicious cycle. And of interest for us in this study, he has noted that as we are talking now, there is a lot of unrecognized mental ill health in our community, which in turn is a major source of marital problems and of divorce. Many husbands, many wives are mentally sick, but they don't know. And as a result, they cause problems. Now, early diagnosis and early treatment may help this, the breakdown of these marriages. Now, the point I'm trying to emphasize, and which, again, in Professor Karama's presentation, he looked at the drug abuse among Muslim youth in East Africa and how to deal with it. The magnitude of the problem is alarming. Now, what I'm trying to, and when you look at the presentation by the late Professor Karama and Professor Kasule, there are striking similarities in some of these causes of the problem. So my appeal to the universities, we can start as a beginning to look at these, undertake empirical research and try to solve problems facing our people. You may start at the area near the university, in the areas of economy, in the areas of health, in the areas of education. What are the problems facing our people? Not in abstract terms, but in an empirical way. And I will give here one example, which has helped Malaysia. And only by so doing and thinking, we can be able to solve problems. I will give one example from Malaysia, which now combines Maqasid Sharia and empirical research. The people, they noted that they have, I'm talking about 5 years ago. I'm not talking about today. 33 or 5 years ago, when I was doing my doctoral studies in Malaysia. This is what I observed at that time. Now things have changed dramatically. At that time, they noted that they have a quite sizable segment of their people who are poor. And they wanted to solve that problem. And they wanted to solve that problem by using the guidance of the Quran. And the guidance of the Quran indicated that zakah is one of the instruments which can solve this problem. When you look at the innama sadaqat, the people who are actually deserve to be given, you know that zakah is meant to solve some of these problems of the poor, the indigent, and so on. Now, what they did first was to do an empirical research on what are exactly the causes of their situation. And they came to the conclusion, the overwhelming majority, 80% of them, the cause was that these people did not have the skills to enable them earn a living during that period, and in the 20th century at that time. And so they said the best way for us is to impart the appropriate skills to these people and to enable them to earn a living. Now, here you have to take the Maqasid Sharia. When you look at the verse about the distribution of zakah, It is simply saying that, okay, if you collect zakah, these are the deserving people. إنما صدقات للفقراء والمساكين, they've listed there all the 8 groups. But if you do so today, you cannot solve the problem. Because these people have a problem which is enduring. And the source of the problem, they don't have the skills to earn a living. So what they did, they said, okay, the others, 20%, others maybe the mother with left by a widow with the 5, 6 children, the father has passed away, the children are small, the mother has no work to do and so on. They said, okay, these people will receive monthly allowances from the Baitul Mal. When the children grow up, they will be sent to training in areas which will enable them earn a living. And this is what they did. But the problem was, the number of the needy was so high, and those who needed training, the number was very big. If you send them, you sponsor them to the different training polytechnics, you will train so few people. So what they did, they used a portion of the Baitul Mal to build very high quality polytechnics needed for training these people to earn a living. Now, I want to say, in Tanzania, about 20 years back, I and some friends, some have passed away, we made a point of establishing Baitul Mal. We ended up having a bait, but no mal. And when the small amount we collected, we tried to distribute it. It didn't work. Why? Because of the realities of the present. So many needy people and so little amount. And if you give them, if you have 2-3 billion, and you give 10 shillings to all the poor, next year they'll still be poor. So unless you assume that zakah has been prescribed because we need to have the poor, so that we make zakah. Now in that case, but if we assume that zakah is part of the solution of solving the problems of the poor, then the methodology used by Malaysia was the best. And in a few years, all these people had a disposable income. So here, what we are saying is that people should go do actual research, see the actual problems of the people, see the causes, and then see how they can mobilize and organize these people to uplift their lives in different areas. The very last thing I want to do is to give you a final assignment, and this is a quotation from our enemy. This is a quotation from our enemy. I want you to think of it. Unfortunately, I'm saying here, it is not in the presentation because it is in the paper, but not in the PowerPoint. In conclusion, I pose to you this problem for you to think about. Let me end this address by inviting you to reflect on following quotes from a very hostile witness of Islam. He is saying, and this is the quote, Again from Yuval Noah Harari in Homo Deus. His quote, how about radical Islam? He's saying that whether we know the world has problems and we need a solution, now he wants to know, how about radical Islam? He's saying how about radical Islam? Can it provide a solution? He says, radical Islam poses no serious threat to the liberal package and to the current world. Because for all their fervor and zealot, the zealots don't really understand the world of the 21st century and have nothing relevant to say about the novel dangers and opportunities that the technologies are generating all around us. They may repeat the mantra that Islam is the answer, but religions that lose touch with the technological realities of the day forfeit the ability even to understand the questions being raised. What will happen to the job market once artificial intelligence outperforms humans in most cognitive tasks? What will be the political impact of a massive new class of economically useless people? What will happen to the relationships, families, pension funds, when nanotechnology and regenerative medicine turn 80 into the new 50? What will happen to human society when biotechnology enables us to have designer babies and to open unprecedented gaps between rich and poor? You will not find any answers to any of these questions in the Quran or Sharia. Now my question is, do you agree or disagree with him? It is my turn now to listen to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. With the authority granted unto me by the Deputy Director RPI, I hereby give the remarks on behalf of the university. Thank you so much for coming, Professor Hamza Mustafa Njozi. He's the Deputy Vice Chancellor Academics, Muslim University of Ngorongoro. We are so much privileged that you have attended this session of the 6th International Islamic Universities Conference that has taken place, that is still taking place up until tomorrow. So we appreciate your time, your efforts, and deliberations that you have made on the topic. I personally, I've learned a lot. I can just give a synopsis of what I've learned. You have basically dwelled so much on the issue of the natural aspect of law and that the laws come from God. You have also basically given an emphasis in respect to the various rights. One of them that have taken so much interest is the right to life, the right to pursue happiness, the right to happiness, the aspect of accountability in terms of human nature. And you have also highlighted how great it is to believe that the law is not man-made, but the law is God-given. And it does not come from anyone, but everyone that is born knowing that law, and that law does not change. It does not change, it is stagnant, and whether someone knows it or does not know it, that law still exists. I attach that to also Aristotle from the legal perspective of the natural school of thought that believe that law comes from God. So I do not have a fundamental question to ask per se, but I just want to appreciate the focus that you gave because it was more of conceptual understanding of aspects of the theories of law and theories of knowledge. Thank you so much.